All right, welcome to Investing with Keto. Thanks for joining me. Today, I've got a special guest. His name's Robert Slatterly, owns a real estate investing company, and he's got a great story, and he's going to share that with us today. So, Robert, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Keto. Thanks for having me.
All right, thank you. Thank you for, taking the time out of your busy schedule. I know you're running a big company out there and, taking your time and sharing your wisdom with us. So, for those who don't know who you are, kind of take us back, introduce yourself and give us a little background.
My story is pretty simple. I own a real estate company here in the Seattle area. I've been working in real estate for 18 years now. And our company focuses on helping people break out of the rat race, showing them how to set some goals and then build rental properties to a certain point to meet those goals. And then, unlike most real estate guys out there, I tell people to stop buying and let their tenants, who are really nice people, pay off those properties, leaving them with a net cash flow that automatically adjusts for inflation. And ultimately, the big goal is break out of the rat race, have your time completely yours.
Nice.
So that's what I do. That's what I do.
Awesome. Now, Robert, kind of take us back to the genesis, to the beginning. I mean, how did you get involved in real estate?
Oh, back to the beginning. Back to the beginning. Well, let's see. I am a college dropout, and I used to work in IT, in information technology, and my beginning actually happened sometime back in 2000. I woke up at 3 a.m. in the computer lab where I was working. And it was kind of hazy, and I woke up. It was middle of the night, early in the morning. I kind of sat up, and I had a keyboard indentation on my side of my face, and I was just kind of groggy, and I was looking around. I was realizing I hadn't seen the sun for over 2 weeks. I was working at a rather small software company that everybody would know the name of here in the Puget Sound region. And I was a young guy. And so working long hours was the norm. I mean, you got in and you worked, and I would work often 7 a.m. till midnight, or sometimes I'd just spend the night. And it was fun. But I was missing out on life because I was just working all the time. I was making good money for a kid at that age. But I knew that if something didn't change, I was going to die in my 40s of a massive heart attack. And that scared me. I didn't have time for dating. I didn't have time for life. And so it was scary. A few weeks after that, I was in Denver, Colorado, and I had an uncle in Denver who was we were friendly. We would talk on the phone on a regular basis. And I went out there, and this man had a life that was completely the opposite of mine. He would sleep in until he wanted to wake up in the morning. He would he would get up, he'd make his breakfast. He lived in a huge house, like a 6,000 square foot house on a big piece of land. It was on 5 acres. He bought a new truck every 2 years. And I'm a truck guy, so the fact that he was driving a new truck, like, oh, it's getting a little dusty. I need to go get a new truck. And his life consisted of him needing to get up, and on occasion he'd have to drive into town, which was 20 minutes away, and go to his office. And there'd always be a stack of mail there, and he'd pick up the first letter and rip it open, and he'd pull out a check, and he'd set that down. And then he'd go through the next one and rip it open, pull out a check, and the stack of envelopes would go down and the stack of checks would go up. And he'd get to the end of that stack of envelopes and he'd look at me and he'd say, "Robert, I'm done." He'd been at work for 20 minutes. I'm done. Let's go to the bank." And his office was on one side of this 4-lane highway. And he would drive the truck from his office just to the other side of the highway to his bankers, or to his bank. And he'd walk in and he'd be like, "Hey, Greg. Hey, Chris." And he knows everybody in the branch. And he'd walk up to the teller at the window and he'd hand her this stack of checks, and she would give him a receipt, and he would turn around and say, "I'm done. What should we do now?" And it wasn't even 11 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
And that fascinated me. Well, it turned out he had these wonderful people in his life called tenants that lived in his rentals that sent him money every month to live the life that he wanted. And I wanted that. And so keep in mind, this was almost 20 years ago. This was 20 years ago. So when I came home to Seattle after that experience, I knew that's what I wanted. That's what I wanted for my life. And I started learning everything I could about real estate. And over the next several years, with many very, very painful and expensive mistakes, I ended up leaving IT, and I got into real estate full time. And well, that's kind of got me to where I am now.
Nice. So, it's kind of fascinating because you were, working and making good money, for such a young guy, and finding yourself, waking up, at wee hours in the morning, realizing you haven't seen the sun in like 2 weeks, right? And then, going to your uncle's and, uncle's place, and you just has a total different life, and realizing that that's what you wanted, right? And then you realize that, real estate was the key, right?
Right.
So now, how did you make that transition? I mean, how did you get into your first deal, and then what got you to like, okay, I know you're a pretty smart guy, so I know you probably dove into education and learning, right? So take us back to kind of that first, when you jumped the trigger to making that first, I know your first flip or your first purchase always, something that's memorable. So kind of take us back to how you got to your first, first property.
Absolutely. No, I wish my story were that romantic. Really what it comes down to is I have done everything in life the hard way. And when I said through many painful and expensive mistakes, I've gotten to where I'm at now. Listen, there are many ways to invest in real estate. The way that I do it is one way that works, and it works very, very well. It's not as sexy as what most people do, but I got started. I bought my first house in 2002, and I bought way more house than I should have bought. The realtor I was working with at the time, this is before I was in real estate, he sold me a house that was what he could get me qualified for. It wasn't necessarily what I could afford. And so that got real painful about a year and a half later when I wasn't able to make my mortgage payments. Fortunately, I was able to sell that and make about $70,000 on the net, which was great. That was a lot of money back then. And I had then, at that time, entered real estate full time. And I was starting to work with people in my peer group in their 20s to help them buy rental properties, because you buy a property and you rent it out, or at least that's as simple as I thought it was. And so we went out, and I was helping clients buy these properties. And because we had equity growth pretty high in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, it was hard to not make money buying properties. You buy them, you sell them a couple of years later, you make 50 grand, and you wash, rinse, repeat, right? The problem came in 2008 when the liquidity dried up. And when the liquidity dried up, literally over the course of an afternoon, banks stopped lending. And the problem with many real estate investment strategies, especially a lot that you'll hear about today, is they require easy money. They require banks to be lending easy money or hard money to be available, or some form of liquidity. And it comes in many different forms, but ultimately debt is a very, very high risk mistress. And she can be a lot of fun to play with, but she can also destroy you if you don't know what you're doing. And so between 2008 and 2012, I went through a real painful experience, because I had 10 properties of my own, about $3.5 million worth of real estate, that all went sideways. Because in 2008, when the liquidity dried up, we had an interesting situation occur for about a year and a half, where property values dropped and rents dropped. And I was in the mindset of, well, let's just call it a Midas complex, where I thought everything I was touching turned to gold. And that turned out to not be the case, because when all of our cash flow dried up and I wasn't able to make debt service payments on those properties, it got real scary and real uncomfortable for a while. And so we ended up selling off and or losing a handful of those 10 properties, soured several relationships with good friends of mine, because we were all in properties that all went underwater, and some of us got out of it better than others. And sometime in mid 2011, 2012, I was sitting with my wife and I said, I know how to make money in real estate. I've proven that, but something's wrong with my model. And the difference was there are really two ways to make money in real estate. You can make money on the equity growth side, which is what flippers do, right? They buy a house for 100,000, they try to sell it for 150. That's an equity bump. The other side of the spectrum is cash flow. And cash flow is not as sexy because making $100 a month doesn't sound real exciting to anybody. But they're polar opposites. Now, most investment strategies are somewhere in the middle. I was banking too heavy on equity growth in my first round. And so I retooled my investment method to focus primarily on cash flow. And when I ran out the numbers, I saw some pretty amazing results. I started talking to my clients about this and I said, hey, look at this. If we look at properties based on the cash flow returns versus the equity growth returns, I'm seeing the potential for making a lot more money. And so we went out and we started doing that. We started in 2012 buying single family properties. And then 2013, 2014 got into duplexes and triplexes and fourplexes. And over the past 8-9 years, that's really been where our bread and butter has been. About 2 years ago, the world seemed to have discovered that fourplexes were a great investment, and the prices of fourplexes have more than doubled in our market, which was great for my investors who were buying 2012 through 2016, and they're very happy. So they're now selling their properties and buying bigger properties. For my own part, I own 2 12-plexes. I own 2 commercial buildings now. My house is free and clear. And my entire investment strategy is built around how much money does someone want to make each month in order to live the lifestyle they want to live? And I ask that question when I first sit down and meet a prospective client. It's what all of my brokers on my team, we've got 18 brokers on the team now, will sit down, and their opening question is always, so how much money do you want to make each month to live your lifestyle? And then when the client sits there and starts shifting around in their seat and thinking about, well, gosh, I don't know, they usually come up with a number. And that number, 9.5 times out of 10 is 10,000 a month. It's just a round number. It's easy for people to quantify. And then we proceed to show them how over the course of a year or two, on average, we can get somebody to a $10,000 a month income on the gross. And then we tell them, then you're going to stop buying and let your tenants, who are really nice people, pay off this portfolio for you. And when we show people how it works, as it turns out, math wins. Math always wins. That's the name of the book I'm writing. Math wins.
Nice.
People look at this in 7 to 10 years of doing what we're doing. They have a free and clear portfolio that's producing that, say, $10,000 a month every month consistently, and lets them live the life they want to live, whether or not they decide to get up and go to their job or not. So that's what we do.
Wow, that's amazing. And in a lot of ways kind of reflects my own story in terms of we were in the same area where we've lost, gotten from 2009 2010, at least for me, and then just having to retool. And that's my current journey right now is I'm retooling and rebuilding that portfolio. So one of the the lessons, I guess, there was a couple of lessons in there for me in terms of just going with the cash flow versus appreciation, because I think especially when people get in, they want to do fix and flips and stuff like that, but and I got caught in that myself, but just realizing it was the cash flow, right? So someone starting out, what are some some tips that you can give someone when they are starting out and wanting to invest?
Well, one of the most common questions I get is, hey, Robert, can you help me build a plan to make extra money using rentals? And the answer is yes. Anybody can do this. It does require a little bit of financial maturity, and it requires having a plan. And really, it's the plan piece that people like to ignore and not focus on. And I think that you've been in this business long enough to know what I'm talking about. You can't just go down the street and buy the first house you see and say, that'll be my rental property. There's some math and some analysis that goes into it. For my part, I have found that the easiest way to do this is through a one-on-one, very relationship-based approach, because everyone's situation is so different, right? Your situation is different financially than mine. We have different goals and objectives. Ultimately, everybody says, I want to make as much money as possible, but they don't know what that means. You need to have very, very specific goals to reach for. And so what we've done is we've actually started a workshop that we run, and it's called Blackwell Workshop. Blackwellworkshop.com is my shameless plug right there. And what we do is we walk people through a 7-step process, 1 step per week, to help them build their own individually tailored portfolio. Basically, I can tell you exactly what it is. The first thing we talk about is establishing your why and figuring out why you want to get into real estate, why you want to use real estate to get ahead. Understanding what your motivation is what will keep you on this path when the going gets rough. Because it's not always sunshine and roses. There are some rough patches. That's just how life works. But after you know what your why is and you've documented that, you need to set goals, and they need to be very specific goals, right? Goals need to be specific. They need to be in writing. They need to be measurable. They need to be your goals, right? And so you go through and you establish specific goals, and goals serve as benchmarks. If you say, I want to make $100,000, that doesn't make a goal. It's just a dream. If you say I want to make $100,000 over the next year, now we have a goal and it's measurable. So we set a goal, and I like monthly because monthly is real easy to figure out. You can look at your budget, or you can look at your sum of your bills and say, it cost me $8,000 a month to live, so I need to make at least $8,000 a month. And there we have a goal. As soon as you have a goal, you can build a plan. And a plan is nothing more than a roadmap. So if you want to drive from Seattle to Los Angeles, you're going to break out your map and you're going to say, well, I'm going to drive along I-5. Now you have a plan with stops along the way. Well, exactly the same. If you want to make $10,000 a month, then you need to set benchmarks. And we're able to start seeing the final result through this plan. So that's where we start. You have to start with your why, set some goals, and then build your plan. The next thing you got to do, what we talked about in week 2, is getting your money right. You have to have your finances under control. We encourage folks, start a living file. You can go online and order a Freedom Filer, freedomfiler.com. I don't get paid for that. It tells you how to organize paper files, what you need to store, how frequently, and when to get rid of things. But you need to have a couple months of bank statements. You need to have a couple years of tax returns. You need to have a good working knowledge of what's on your credit report. We encourage people to go to annualcreditreport.com and get a free copy of each of their 3 bureaus' credit reports and review them. Make sure that everything on your credit report is accurate. Once you've got your financials organized, call and speak with a lender and say, I'm looking at buying a house, either for investment or for occupying yourself. And let that lender walk you through the process of what it would take to get qualified for financing. Before you ever look at a property, you need to know what your options are. Otherwise, you're wasting your time. So that's week 2. In our 3rd week, we talk about real estate 101 and different types of properties, because what's right for you, Keto, might not be right for me, and what's right for me might not be right for somebody else. I own some commercial buildings. Right now, I'm sitting in a commercial building that's 90% vacant. That would crush most people. I've got a $12,000 a month negative cash flow because we closed on the building right before everything shut down for the health scare right now. That's okay because it works with my business plan. Different people have different needs for their portfolio. So you have to understand what different types of real estate there are out there. I'm not a big fan of vacation rentals. Some people swear by them and say that you should only buy Airbnbs and VRBOs, and you should buy beach rentals or lake rentals or ski rentals or whatever. There are some people that are really big into fix and flips. There are different options And you should know what those are before you start investing in real estate. So we talk about that in the third week. After you've got your plan, you've got your money right, and you've got a basic understanding of what your options are. In the fourth week, we talk about searching for, identifying, and analyzing properties. And if you want to know everything I know about real estate, everything that I learned the hard way between 2000 and 2012, I'm going to tell it all to you right now. We analyze properties based on 4 key factors. We look at cash flow, we look at appreciation, we factor for depreciation, and we account for debt reduction. If you find a property that positive cash flows at least 7 or 8%, and you buy it with a 30-year fixed, I can show you how to have that property free and clear in 7 to 10 years. And then you're just scaling your portfolio. You figure out how many of those you need to make your 10,000 a month or whatever the number is. That's what week 4 is all about. After you've found a property that you like and that looks good on paper, you have to know how to write an offer. So we spend an entire week talking about how to write an offer if you're not a real estate professional, or if you're working with a real estate professional who maybe doesn't have the experience of dealing with investment properties. There is a right way to write an offer so that you're able to do a full feasibility on a property before you commit any big money to it. We also like to teach people. I want people to understand how these processes work. So we talk about the importance of a home inspection or a property inspection of any sort. We talk about what title insurance is and to look at the title on the property and make sure that you're looking at a property that you can take free and clear title to. We want people to understand what escrow is. What does closing mean? Because that's different in each market, right? And so we spend an entire week talking about that. Week 5 is all about that. And then after somebody buys a property, then they have to figure out what to do with it. So week 6 is all about property management. And we talk about stabilization. What is stabilization? I mean, everything in real estate is easy until people get involved, all right? And what do they call it? The 3 T's, right? You've got tenants, toilets, and taxes, right? So we talk about property management and how to structure property management. We talk about stabilization being over the first 12 months, you own a property, you want to get every tenant in a 1-year lease. You want to make sure that all your tenants are current on their rents, that there are no major delinquencies and there are no major maintenance hassles. And once you've reached that point, that's when you get to evaluate moving on to buying another property, if that's the right time. And then the last part of our process is just tying it all together and making sure that people put the pieces in place so they can go out and make it happen. So that's what we do.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, that's great. I mean, I just felt like, you've really gotten the steps down from taking someone from the beginning, finding out their why, to just the in-between steps, from A to Z. Because a lot of people, like you said, they don't really have a plan. They say, oh, I want real estate, but really, having a goal, having a plan that will help you get to your goal. So that's phenomenal. And I'll put in the show notes. I mean, if someone wanted to take your course, where would they go?
Just have them go to blackwellworkshop.com and all the details in the course are there.
Awesome. Well, Robert, thank you so much. I mean, that, just definitely some nuggets out there, especially for someone who is just starting out, or someone who has been like myself, who's been in this game seems like forever, but I'm always continue learning,
That's the only way to do it, man. You've got to keep learning. Every single day I learn something new.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So thank you for your time. And, if anybody else wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to do that?
They're welcome to reach out to me, call, text, whatever. We're at bre.io is our website, blackwellrealestate.io, bre.io, or drop me a call or a text on my cell. It's 425-205-1000. That gets to me, and I will answer any questions folks have. So I'm happy to help.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time, and thank you for the knowledge you're instilling in us. I really appreciate it. All right.
Appreciate you having me here, Keto. Thank you.
Thanks.